Our next guest today is Bob Goodland, who is a veteran of the Korean War.
No, after the Korean War.
After the Korean War.
Yes.
A serviceman in the Army.
Right.
Yes. And so, Bob, I just want to thank you for your service to our country and for being here today. And I had heard that you'd given a talk to the St. Dominic students recently about the Army, and I just thought, well, that's just would be a good thing to have you just come right on here and tell us about it.
Yeah. Well, I had graduated from UK, I guess, in 1958, and at that time it was a requirement that you serve in the Army Reserve or some kind of reserve program, and I signed up to serve in the Army Reserve program. And at that time I was between school and my first job, so I joined up in Harrodsburg, which is Mercer County, and then got a job in Cincinnati with Armor at that time, and went to the reserve unit there, and then came back, transferred me back to Stanford, which is east of here a few miles, and while I was working from between Stanford and Springfield, I got a letter saying that I was to report for active duty during the Berlin crisis when John F. Kennedy was our president. And of course I was in reserve, which meant that I had an obligation should I be called up. So anyway, the reserve unit I was in said, well, you are Staff Sergeant 6. We want you to go as a scout, so to speak, for lack of a better word, to Fort Polk, Louisiana, which, by the way, that's Camp Swampy in Beetle Bailey cartoon. That's.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, Fort Polk, Louisiana. So it had about 2 days' notice. Got down there, trying to get ready for 500 new recruits to come in about a month. Anyway, the weeds were over our head. The buildings were in bad state of repair. We were down there about a week, and we got a call saying, well, now we're not going to Fort Polk, Louisiana. We're going to Fort Chaffee, Arkansas. Long story short, I come home, get the old car, and take off to Fort Chaffee, Arkansas. Go out there, same scenario. A place had been closed for a number of years, weeds grown up, sidewalks in a mess, buildings in a mess. So here we start getting ready for 500 100th Division people out of central Kentucky.
Now, what was your job? What was your, you had to get ready for these guys to come in?
And I was sent in advance because of my rank. And the rank, not because of what I did, but I had a college degree and you get promoted a little faster.
So your rank was, what was your?
E6, Sergeant.
Sergeant.
And anyway, about 3 weeks later, we got these troops in from all over the southeastern United States. It was a kind of a interesting combination of people. We had Americans. We had a lot of Indians out of the southwestern part of the country, and they came to Fort Chaffee. Interesting names like Morning Star and Rocking Horse and that sort of thing. So anyway, they got started training, and the commander of the 100th Division said, we need a troop information and education person, TINE. The Army assumes when you get in there, especially on basic training, which is what we were doing, you don't read a magazine, you don't listen to the radio, and you don't watch TV. 2 or 3 reasons. Number one, it's not available to you. Number two, you're too busy. You get up 4 o'clock in the morning, you get in at 6, 7 at night. So they said, we want you to be Troop Information Education Instructor for this division, which is TINE, they called it. So I started reading magazines, newspapers, which the Army provided, New York Times, a Courier Journal, because we were from Kentucky, the Lexington Herald. I got sporting events and so forth and so on. So once a day, twice a day, I would talk to the troops about what was going on in the country.
Mm-hmm.
In Germany, in Arkansas, any catastrophic event, I reported to them. And that went on for about 6 months. And then I got to talking to the officers of the 100th Division. I started instructing them in, daily things that were happening. And Kentucky had won the NCAA championship in 1958. And I called the University of Kentucky and talked to Bernie Shively, who was athletic director, and I said, I would like to show that final game on TV and KRRC in Little Rock, Arkansas, a couple weeks from now. So they sent me the film. And I put out a memo to everybody that Kentucky finals the NCAA tournament for 1958 were going to be on this television station in Little Rock. So I think the viewership was 90%. And those are the kind of things that I did. Then, with about 2 months left on this year, they said, okay, you are trained in M48 tanks as a radio operator. That's back when they had International Morse Code, DOT, and all that. Went to Fort Knox, spent 8 weeks, and you set up in the turret about M48 tank, and you tell the other tanks on your flanks what to do, or the ones in the back. So the instructor was kind of funny. He said, well, one thing about it, we don't have to worry about the enemy understanding what we're doing because we don't know what we're doing. Anyway, I went to Berlin, Germany in 1959, 1960, I guess, somewhere along in there. Anyway, and I was in charge of a group of guards on the Friedrichstrasse Point. If you can picture this, this was 100-mile stretch of M48 tanks, both Western Germany tanks and U.S. tanks and our allies, against East Germany tanks, sitting about 50 foot apart.
Oh my gosh.
Along the Berlin Wall. And we walked those guard duty. And I was responsible for getting people out there for a certain section. So nothing ever happened. Fortunately, the Berlin Wall came down. Kennedy was very instrumental in that. And but I'm convinced on numerous occasions if somebody had shot a firecracker, we would have had the Third World War. That's how close it was. But unfortunately, nothing ever happened. I was there 2 or 3 months, came back home, the thing was settled, and good experience.
Wow.
Being in the military. What it does, it humbles you. Because, the first thing you learn is that, the person in charge is maybe not too smart, but he's in charge. Now, I say he because I didn't have she's then. But anyway, he's in charge. You do what he says. Mm-hmm. And, of course, I still live by this today. When you went in the orderly room in a military post, there was always a big picture of the President of the United States. And this man is your commander-in-chief. You serve for him. In this case, John F. Kennedy, which never bothered me because we were in Arkansas about 2 days. He came out on Air Force One and spoke to everybody out there.
Wow.
And walked with a limp coming down the steps from Air Force One and explained that he was in the PT, whatever it was, 109 or whatever it was, during the war. So we'd been complaining and so forth. I had a good job. I lost my job, and had to go out there. But fortunately, the laws protect your job while you're gone. But there was a complaint after that. We were all very satisfied that he had given his time to the service of the country. We were glad to do that. So that's kind of a summary of my military background. It was about 3 years. But I would say it was divine intervention. I was in a position where I really didn't know. You know, I had a degree in bacteriology and bacteriology and chemistry.
And that was from UK?
Yeah, from UK.
And you were already working when you got called up?
Yeah.
And that was, you were working then for Armour?
Yeah, I was working in the laboratory in Cincinnati, working with Procter and Gamble on some projects and so forth and so on. And anyway, I guess that background was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because I also used that at times in the service. And then since getting out, you know, you hear of a recall for salmonella or poisoning or, you know, Listeria monocytogenes. I'm very familiar with all that, you know. So anyway, a good background, and I've enjoyed that. So the rest of the story is I ended up working for Armour for 36 years, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Here
and you were
Frankfort.
from Harrodsburg?
Harrodsburg, yeah.
Yeah, nice town.
Mm-hmm.
And, but then, I guess when you were in Cincinnati, after the service, and you went back to Armour then, in Cincinnati.
Yes.
And then they must have transferred you down here at some point.
That is correct, yes. Yeah.
And Frances, I guess, your first wife who passed, she was from that area?
Lexington.
Oh, she was from Lexington. Okay. So you met her maybe in college then? Yes.
And this is a real compliment to Springfield. Her dad was on the Board of Trustees, University of Kentucky, a personal friend of Adolph Rupp and Bernie Shively and all that group. And that was, of course, a little before my time. But he was president of Lexington Country Club. And anyway, I saw an ad in the Lexington Herald one day that I picked it up going through there. I was riding a train from Cincinnati to Stanford, and I stopped there at the train station, picked up a paper, and it said they had an opening for a licensed chemist, American Water Company in Lexington, and met a pretty good job. So anyway, I ended up getting some papers and some information on it, and finally got an application, filled it out, sent it in. They called me in for an interview, so I didn't even tell her. I told her I was going somewhere on business, so I go to Lexington Water Company, have an interview, and about a week later they called me and said, "You got the job." Well, I was making would have been twice as much as I was making, because traditionally in the food business, Armour, you don't make big money. It's narrow margins, you know? So anyway, I came home and I told her, I said, "Hey, how would you like to go back to Lexington?" I thought she'd jump at it. She said, "Oh no, I don't want to go back to Lexington." And they knew everybody that was anybody in Lexington. Lived on Chenaway Drive off Richmond Road.
I know where it is.
You know? She said, "I have friends here. I want to raise our family here. I don't want to go to Lexington." You know?
I swear.
And she had got acclimated to this laid-back, low-key, for the lack of a better word, environment in Springfield, Kentucky, and loved it. She had friends she went to coffee with, and
played bridge with.
Played bridge and got involved in everything. And then after she convinced me I was going to stay here, I got involved in Farm City, which was a big thing back then. June Dairy Month, which was a big thing. Was in Chamber of Commerce, twice president. You know, I was in the Rotary Club when it had 100 members. You can picture that. They got about 20 now, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, we got involved in our church, of course. And I had two daughters, which you know, Lisa and Linda.
Right.
And
Linda, who's a teacher here. Well, teacher here.
Right. And Lisa's with Ruggles Sign Company in Versailles.
Okay.
She's their longest standing employee of 26 years.
Oh.
She's office
Of course, Ruggles, all the family come from here.
Right.
So.
Yeah, so
For a lot of them.
Yeah. It's an interesting story. Recently, Carla Abbey was telling me about a survey that she had done by some company for tourism. And in summary, the company said, this is a laid-back, easy-going, nice, warm, friendly community. I said, Carla, all you had to do is ask me. I could have told you that, you know. And that's the way it is, you know.
Yeah.
And when I retired, which, 12 years ago or whatever, I've had about 5 different jobs. I worked a year in the bank. I sold cars for a year. I appraised property for a year and a half. Various and sundry things. And involved with St. Dominic's heavily, St. Catherine. So never a dull moment.
Yeah.
And we love this community. And I just can't.
And now you're on city council.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't going to mention that. But
so you've stayed active and involved, and Rose, whom Rose was your teacher. I mean, your wife now, who Rose was a special ed teacher
right.
at the Washington County High School, and then ran some other programs.
Mentor program.
The mentor program, and got you all involved with foster children, and
yes.
And you've just had a very interesting life.
Yeah. It's interesting, when I was campaigning for the city council, she went with me, particularly up, High Street and up in that area. Well, she knew about everybody up there. Not only did she know who lived there, she knew their parents. Mm-hmm. And she had their parents in school, and then she had these kids, and had a good mm-hmm. relationship with them. And she loved every one of them, and still does. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say probably she certainly was helpful in your campaign with her. I mean, she's taught probably, because she taught for a long time, so she knows a lot of kids, and now they would be grown.
That's right.
And their kids.
That's right.
So, yes, I can, but so you, back to, now I know with your being at UK, you had an interesting story about that I wanted to hear.
Yeah. Well, I grew up on a farm in Mercer County, 80 acres. That wouldn't be much more than a yard this day and time, My dad and mother had an 80-acre farm. We never had a lot of money, but we didn't know it because nobody else had any. This is in I was born in 36. This is after the Depression in the 40s. And if you go back to the temperature extremes in this country, the hottest days in the summer was 1936. It was 100 plus for days on end.
Ooh.
My mother was pregnant with me. She was in her 8th month in August of 36, the hottest month on record. There was no electricity, no fans, and she was carrying me, and I was born in September of 36. Between September of 36 and January of 37, I had chicken pox and almost died. She carried me on a pillow for 8 or 10 weeks. All my skin came off. So in 1937, in January, the Great Flood hit Louisville, which was, catastrophic in this area.
Exactly.
So anyway, Dad had a small farm, very, very religious, Southern Baptist, never missed church, and I'll make a long story short out of this. I graduated from Salvisa High School. We played Willisburg and Mackville and, some of these teams around in basketball. And Daddy always said, who finished the 4th grade, he and Mother, as far as they got. That's all the school they had.
Right.
There was no other schools then. Convenient. He said, I'd like for you to go get a college degree, get a white shirt, and sit back in an air-conditioned office and have it made the rest of your life. Don't get out and have to work like I do in the fields and sweat bees stinging you and making very little or no money. Well, God bless him, he didn't realize when you put on a white shirt and sit in an office, air-conditioned office, and you've got a responsible job, it's very stressful. Not only stressful, it's lonely. But anyway, they decided I should go to college. Our high school class had 18 people, and 8 boys and 10 girls. They just passed 4 of the boys on. Actually, only 4 of us got diplomas. So he decided I needed to go to the University of Kentucky. And all we knew was on Euclid Avenue. Had a 1950 model Plymouth car, barely made it up there. He let me out at the corner of Euclid Avenue and Rose Street in September of 1954. I had no money, basically. He said, I had saved $50, which was a big savings. He gave me 2 checks, blank checks, on the Lawrenceburg National Bank. Said, if you need money, sign my name by you. But said, be careful, there's not much money in the bank. The truth of the matter is, I don't think there was any. So, keeping in mind, I got $50 in my pocket. I start down Euclid Avenue to the historic Memorial Coliseum, where 2,000 students from all over the country were registering to go to school. That was a big class back then, 2,000. And they were all sitting on the bleachers, and they had all these stations down below, English 1A and Biology 1A and all this. And I didn't have a clue about what I was supposed to do, what college was going to be in or nothing. I thought, well, I want to get in the food business with an emphasis on dairy, and I love bacteriology, and I love animals and zoology. So somehow, when I filled out this form, I never heard of SAT, no such thing. I just walked in. I walked down the street. Keep in mind now, I don't have any place to live, and I got $50 in my pocket. So I finally get to the area where it says start of registration, a big arrow pointing there, and I go there, and the guy says, what do you want to major in? I said, I don't know. He said, you better decide. You got about an hour. So I don't know. I wrote down something and took it back and went over to this other fellow, and he said, well, you need to get in this class, Basic English 1A, Algebra 1A, and on and on. So I finally found those and got signed up. Went over to pay the tuition, which was the final stop. That started at 9 o'clock in the morning. It was now 6 p.m. Now they register online in 10 minutes. Here we were.
And you hadn't even applied or been actually even admitted.
They didn't know I existed.
I know.
Now, keep in mind that I'm in there with kids from Lafayette, Henry Clay, Manual, and Mail. They sat out at a typewriter and doing 50, 60 words a minute. I'd only seen one typewriter in my life at our high school at Sal Visa, and most of the keys were off, so you couldn't tell what keys you were typing on. They had one typewriter. I go over to the registrar, and he said, well, that'll be $80, Mr. Goodlett. I said, well, I don't have $80. Well, you don't? Well, what are you doing here? I said, I want to get a college education. My dad wants me to get a degree. And that's why I'm here. Anyway, we had some conversation back and forth, and he left to go talk to one of his superiors. And he finally came back and he said, well, this is an exception. We've never had anything like this. And I was afraid to make out this check because I was afraid it would be cold that I had in my pocket.
Yeah.
So he said, well, the only thing we can do is that you've got $50, give us $40. And he kind of got caustic. He said, you're half registered. We're going to make out an IOU, and it'll be in the registrar's office over on Limestone Street, and you owe the college $40. But you can go ahead and take these classes. We're going to approve it because we think you're honest and all that. So if you can picture this, I walked, got out of there, had my classes, English 1A, Algebra 1A, zoology, which I thought maybe was a study of zoos, but that's, ology didn't mean a zoo. But I got zoology over in the Funkhauser building. It's still there today. They still use it. And then 2 or 3 other classes. But I walk, that was my only mode of transportation. I walk with this one bag. It wasn't a suitcase, it was a bag of clothes, not very many. From Euclid Avenue up Rose Street, which now is the, the medical center, walked down Rose to Lime and up Lime to Mason Headley. It's a street that goes from Versailles, Waller Avenue.
Waller.
I turned the corner at Waller and Limestone. I saw this little house. And by the way, I saw it yesterday. I took Rose's sister up in Wisconsin and showed her where my first room was. And it said room for rent up in the 3rd story. Go up and knock on the door. Little old lady comes to the door, and I said, by the way, I'm a student at UK, or I'm going to be, and I need a place to stay. She said, well, it's a small room. It's not much. It's kindly in the 3rd floor. I just converted an attic, and you'd have to come down to the 1st floor to use the bathroom. I said, that's fine. I said, how much is it? She said, $10. And I said, well, I'm a little short of money. Could I pay you at the end of the month? Oh, yeah, that's the way we do it. You don't pay in advance. You pay at the end of the month.
Oh, for goodness sake.
So all the while I'm thinking, I got to eat. My hair was a little bit long. I got to get a haircut, which my dad always said, you don't have any tattoos and keep your hair short. Because if you get a tattoo, don't come home. And don't come home with long hair, because he was a barber at Penn Dentist Club in Louisville for a few years.
Oh, my.
Which is, pretty
Yeah.
something. But anyway, that was in September, and that was like on a Thursday, I believe, Wednesday or Thursday. So on Thursday morning, I get up real early, 6 o'clock, because I've lived on a farm. I walk up Rose Street to the dairy processing building, it's University of Kentucky Dairy Products Building. And I go in and I ask if they need any help. And the guy said, we can't do the hiring. Said, Dr. Rudnick will be here pretty soon. He gets here real early. I guess it's 6:30 or 7. About 7 o'clock, Dr. Rudnick came in. His dad was head of the dairy department at Iowa State University at Ames, one of the greatest people I've ever known. And I said, Dr. Rudnick, I need a job real bad. He said, what can you do? I said, I'll do anything you want me to do. He said, you might be in business. The delivery boy that we had just quit. He mashed his fingers on his first trip, had these old wire milk cages. He put the milk in, and he said he quit. Could you do that? I said, well, I'm willing. So he got the supervisor to go with me. We left and went to the dorm and unloaded milk. And at that time they did milk, ice cream, cheese, cottage cheese, and butter, all in that building. And it went to the dorm, all the dorms. That's Donovan Hall. You've heard of Donovan Hall?
Yeah.
That's where the football team ate. So anyway, he showed me around, went around this circle. It took about 3 hours. And then I had to go to class about 9 o'clock. So, but he said, you come back at 3 o'clock or we're going to do this all over on the other side of the campus. So went over to the other side, over at Holmes Hall, where all the girls were and all that. Of course, they separated back then. So anyway, and I'll shorten this story in the essence of time, but the second day I showed up at Donovan Hall at 7 a.m. to deliver milk, ice cream, butter, and cheese. And I saw these muscular-looking guys coming in, and unbeknownst to me, it was a football team coming in to eat. They could get as many eggs as they wanted. A lot of them ate 6 and 8 eggs. This lady, I heard her say, I want to see that delivery boy out there. This old lady had been a cook there for 20 years. She said, young man, I've got 4 kids at home. I know you have a certain amount of product that you can be short and still be okay when you get back over there. She said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll fix you the biggest breakfast that you ever had in your life, which I was accustomed to, being on the farm. At 7 o'clock, you come in here, you get all the eggs, bacon, or ham, or whatever, sausage that you want, biscuits, and the whole bit, gravy. Well, I weighed 130 pounds, 5'8", little short, skinny guy. I'd worked on the farm, so I said, that's fine. She said, you have to leave me 2 quarts of milk for my kids. That's what I was allowed to be short. I could be short, too. Actually, when he started, I was over 2 when I started. I got back, I was even. So I worked that out. So coincidentally, the same day, she had called, unbeknownst to me, to a friend of hers over at Holmes Hall. When I got there at 3 o'clock, a lady said, I want to see that delivery boy. So she comes out and said, I'll fix you the best dinner that you've ever had in your life if you'll help me with my family. Leave me a little cheese and butter occasionally. I said, that's great. There I was, had $50 in my pocket, got to pay $10 rent, need to get a haircut, had my breakfast set up and my lunch or my dinner, and 2 meals a day was fine the way I ate because they just give you all you wanted. They treated me like a football player, although I didn't look like one. Anyway, went on, and my mother and dad had 2 boys, and my brother's 2 years younger than I am. He came up there to go to UK, and he didn't like it. And he stayed 3 weeks, and he called me one night and said, I'm going home. I said, you can't go home? Anyway, I had a $300 car at that time that I'd bought the summer before. And anyway, he said, you can either, I'm going to hitchhike or you can take me. So I went and picked him up, took him home. Mother and Daddy crying, left them crying. I go back to Lexington and finished getting my degree. And in the meantime, I had worked in the summer at Cudahy Foods in Harrodsburg. They made cheese, butter, and ice cream. Boy, was I getting the background. I was getting it all. They gave me all the rough jobs. My first check for 80 hours was $16.
Oh, my goodness.
I made 30 cents an hour. So anyway.
What year was that?
1955, the summer of 55.
Okay.
So in September of 55, I get ready to go back to school. September 12th, I'll never remember it. School started later back then. I go over to tell the manager from the plant that, hey, thanks for the job. You know, I'd made money and I'd take my lunch. Typically lunch was a can of Vienna sausage and a tomato out of the garden. That's my typical lunch. Or bologna, you know, tomato. Or sausage that Mother had made for breakfast. Anyway, I had saved up $300 and some that summer. Now, when somebody asked me if I drank beer in college, I said no, I didn't have any money to drink beer. So anyway, he said, hey, we've been watching you. When everybody over there takes a break in your department, you sit down real quick, eat your sandwich, and then you go back to work. And don't finish your break. He said, we've also noticed at noon, you get a half hour for lunch, you take 10 minutes, you go help in another department. He said, we need people like that. He went back and said, I got something for you. He opened up the safe. I never will forget it. I didn't know what he was doing. Brought me out a check for $300, tax-free. So I had $600.
Wow.
Okay. Did that 3 years in a row. The check got bigger every year. I worked there 3 years. Of course, later on I got to be a president of fraternity at UK. We had 100 members, and I couldn't work the 4th summer. But anyway, I got ready to graduate in May or June of 1958, and it got dawned on me. They kept giving us notices if you have any unpaid bills that your diploma could be withheld. So I thought, gosh, I've got 140 hours, 4 years of work, and I owe them $40. I better get over there and find out. But that time I had a little money.
Yeah.
Went over there, spent a half a day, off and on. My name, we don't see a record of that anywhere. I said, well, I owe University of Kentucky $40. I want to pay it. They would not accept it. They said, we can't accept $40. We don't have any record of you owing that. We can't just take $40. I said, well, I hope you're not going to hold my diploma. So they called 2 or 3 people, and of course there was about 2,000 graduates. Remember Bill Spivey, 7'2"?
Yeah.
He was standing in front of me at graduation. Here I am, 5'8". But anyway, I never did pay that $40, and have not to this day, but I do have a degree.
And I bet your parents were awfully proud of you. I bet they went to that graduation ceremony.
Yes, they did. And the reason I wanted to tell this story is that I've had people say I didn't have an opportunity to go to college because I didn't know what a scholarship was back then. They didn't exist. There was no GI Bill. you know, because I hadn't been in the Army yet, see.
Right.
I went to the Army later.
After. Mhm.
Yeah. But anyway, the point I'm making to this, the people that might watch this show, don't use that as an excuse that you don't have the money. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's my story at the University of Kentucky.
Well, I think that's a great story.
Well,
And that's fabulous. And it just goes to show you, with hard work, and you know, if you put your mind to something, like you said, you can do it.
yeah. And that's the point of telling the story. Not that I'm bragging. I don't mean to do that. But it can benefit other people because you can do whatever you have to do
Right.
and want to do, if you want
Yeah.
to do it bad enough.
You got up and went to work before school and after school, and it paid off.
It paid off. Yeah.
Because people can see when you work hard, they're the kind of people they want to hire.
Right. And
So,
and I carried that philosophy right on through all the years. Your father-in-law, CH, he and I worked together for 30 years. He'll tell you how hard we worked.
Yeah.
And he was no exception. He worked hard,
yeah,
but so did I. And I didn't ask him to do something that I wouldn't do, and he knows that. And then, of course, later on, Charlie worked there, and
right.
so forth. So anyway,
Well, and you got your degree in, what was that degree in?
dairy science,
Dairy science.
which with emphasis on chemistry and bacteriology, and I still love to do that today.
Yeah,
I love those two areas.
yeah,
So, and it helped me a lot because we've had a lot of emphasis, the last few years on food safety, and that was right down my alley. And that helped me with ConAgra. I've probably been in 50 of their plants throughout the country to help with bacteriological problems when I was with Armor, and it was a good background. And I liked it, I enjoyed it, and if you enjoy something, you're good at it.
Yeah.
So to speak.
Yeah.
So that's
And
my
then you got here, and Francis wouldn't leave, and you stayed here and raised your children and contributed to this community. And I just want to thank you very much for that.
You're quite welcome. Just recently, we went to Nashville, Tennessee, and went to Murfreesboro, McMinnville, and Woodbury in a straight line north toward Kentucky. My wife and I wanted to go to nursery. That's the nursery capital of the world for plants and all. ConAgra had plants. Armor did in all three of those towns. All three were about the same size as Springfield back in the 50s. But nothing was like Springfield. CH and I we had 2 plants in Minnesota. Minnesota is daylight and dark to Springfield. There's only one Springfield. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but Stanford is the same size as Springfield. I worked there a year. People are totally different. When you come this side of Danville, it's a different world. This is a great place
Yeah.
to live, work, worship, get involved.
Raise your family.
That's somebody said, "Why are you running for city council?" Well, you know the story. I really didn't mean to run. I had somebody else set up to run. They backed out. But anyway, I will do whatever to make this town a better place to live. It's already good, and that you attribute a lot of that to your late husband and yourself and the people before you.
Well, lots of people before us.
Yes,
Exactly.
yes. And but we need to continue that.
Certainly.
We have an obligation to do that. And I've got 6 grandchildren in this community.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to make life better for them.
Right. And it's like Lynn said, in talking with him, we all, the people that live here, need to consider giving back to their community and staying involved, because if we don't, if you're not vigilant about it, you can lose those things before you realize it.
Right.
So it's something you just can't sit back and let go. You just have to be constantly working on improving things and being involved and keeping things moving.
But I'm convinced if people around us knew how nice Springfield was. Sure, we have some problems. We all know that. But if they knew how nice this community was, our population wouldn't be 3,000. It would be 10 or 15. But we don't want that. We want what we've got.
Yeah,
And we've got a lot to be thankful for.
we really do.
We really do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
It's been a pleasure having you.
Okay, you're welcome.